Welcome back. I'm Genevieve. As March wraps up, it's time to check and see how I did on my 2025-26 Our Fantasy Bingo card. Grab a drink and settle in as we talk about the fantasy, sci-fi, and horror books I read over the past year. So if you don't know, quick summary of what the Our Fantasy Bingo is. You're watching this video at the perfect time. Our Fantasy runs from April 1st to March 31st. That I have no idea why. They don't explain why, but for those of you type A people like me that really want something to go from January to December, it's not happening. But you're watching at the perfect time because this video will release shortly before the 26-27 Our Fantasy Bingo card will release. So if you're interested, then you can go find the new bingo card and work on those prompts. So it's a bingo card of 25 prompts that you pick books, asterisks that fall into the sci-fi, fantasy, or horror realm. That's something you have to keep in mind. It's funny, there were a couple times where I was like, oh, I could use this book, or oh, I could read that book. And then I realized it wasn't a fantasy, sci-fi, or horror book, which is funny because that's primarily what I read. But every once in a while, I would read a contemporary lit or a mystery, and I would really want to use it. And then I would think like, oh, this doesn't meet like the base criteria. If sci-fi, fantasy, or horror is not your genre, this might not be the right reading challenge for you. However, if you've been wanting to get into sci-fi, fantasy, or horror, then this is a really good way to try. The prompts they're very generic. It's pretty easy to find a whole litany of books that help you meet the criteria, and Reddit has a bunch of posts within the Our Fantasy subreddit that make tons of suggestions, and there has even been storygraph challenges created where people put even more suggestions on there. So if you're not so much of a Reddit person, if Reddit kind of intimidates you, then I would recommend Storygraph as another really good resource for keeping track of things and getting book suggestions. There are a couple rules. You can only have one book that is a reread. Everything has to be new. That's kind of the point, is to introduce yourself to new authors. And one square is one book. You can't double dip on a square. You're also supposed to only have one author for each book. So if you read a series, you can't use those same books for different squares. So this really is a way to introduce yourself to 25 asterisks, new authors, or new books from those authors, new to you. Because that is like on the more challenging side, a lot of other book challenges don't have such strict criteria. They do allow you to swap one square. So if you're really struggling with one of the squares, you can substitute it for a previous Our Fantasy Bingo square. And then of course they have like a collection of all of those, so you can go and you can look them up. I thought I was gonna have to do that this year, but I ended up not having to do it. I think I'm gonna have my card here and then book covers here. I don't know, I might switch it. I might put my card here and book covers here. I actually have a lot of the books. I say most, but it doesn't feel like as many as I thought it would. I previously made a video, I think it was
April, May, June, July, August, September, October.
I guess I made a video around like September, October. That was like my mid-year check-in for this. So the books that I had completed at that check-in, I'm just gonna go through really quickly. I'm not gonna tell you a whole lot. I'm going to suggest that you watch that previous video. I will link it above. If you want more in-depth information about the first half that I had read, watch that. I'm gonna try to keep this short and sweet. I'm gonna go in order by the card, but I'm gonna go in order from my 50% check-in all the way to what I've continued to read. Row 1, square 1, the prompt was Knights and Paladins. One of the protagonists of the book had to be a knight or paladin, and then hard mode was that they had to have made some sort of oath or promise, or I think of it as like being officially on a quest. So at the time, I had just started reading T. Kingfisher's Saints of Steel series. Originally, I was gonna use the first book. The first book is Paladin's Grace. I've since continued in the series, and I decided to use Paladin's Strength for this because it did help me complete hard mode. I gave this book 4.75 stars. I highly recommend this series. I've since read the first 3, and I'm gonna continue on. We'll have to come back to the rest of the first row later in the video. I'm gonna move down to the second row, the 6th square, Impossible Places. I'm gonna read this one directly because I love the way it's worded. Read a book set in a location that would break a physicist. The geometry, non-Euclidean, only us STEM nerds know that. The volume, bigger on the inside. The directions, merely a suggestion. And then hard mode meant that at least 50% of the book had to take place in this impossible location. For this, I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I know it's a Booktube darling. I, however, gave it 3 stars. I didn't get the hype. Next was a book in parts. That is pretty common in sci-fi fantasy books. It's hard for planning purposes, so I guess I'll tell you what I mean. Read a book that is separated into sections within the main text. This is the one where I really recommend you get suggestions from people that have already read the book, because it's not like books have table of contents anymore, and so it's hard to know if a book is written in parts. Some authors tend to write that way, but it's hard to know that until you're reading a book. And then hard mode was that it had to have 4 or more parts, which is even harder to know until you're reading a book, unless you're like flipping through. For this, I just happened upon Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This I gave 4.75 stars. Honestly, I probably in my heart have bumped it up to 5 stars. I've gone on to read Harrow the Ninth. By the time you see this video, maybe I will definitely have started Nona the Ninth. Continuing on in row 2 is Gods and Pantheons. Read a book featuring divine beings, and the hard mode is that it has multiple pantheons that are involved. For this, I read A Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers. It's a short little cozy novella. Absolutely loved it. 4.75 stars. Highly recommend. The last book in row 2 is the book club or read-along book. Our Fantasy has various book clubs that they do through the Reddit platform. They all follow like different genres, and hard mode is to actually like read it when the book club is reading it and participate in the book club, the Our Fantasy book club. I read The River Has Roots by Amal El Motar. I really enjoyed this. This was another novella. I highly recommend the audio. I gave this 4.75 stars. I did not participate in the read along. While I am a avid Reddit browser, scroller, silent member, I have yet to actually participate in anything like that. It kind of terrifies me. Okay, so moving on to row 3, parent protagonist. And then hard mode is that the child is also a major character in the book. For this, my mother and I buddy read The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Feel free to watch our buddy read blog where we talk all about this book. Next up, here's another fun word, epistolary. Read a book that prominently features diary, journal entries, letters, messages, newspapers, transcripts, basically other written forms of communicating. And then hard mode is that the book is entirely told in that epistolary format. For this, I completed the Emily Wilde series with Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett. I reread the first 2 books in the trilogy just to kind of refresh my memory. It had been a while, and I didn't enjoy this one as much as I enjoyed the previous ones. However, I did give this 4.25 stars, so I still recommend the series as a whole, and I'm glad I own it. Oh, and the book is, if you're unfamiliar, all of these books are written as Emily Wilde, the main character's scholarly journal articles, so this did meet hard mode criteria. The next square is a book published in 2025. I could have picked a bajillion books to meet this criteria. I read a whole bunch of books that were written in 2025. Hard mode is that it is a debut novel, meaning it was the author's first novel. So for this, I read Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. This is a romantasy book that my mother bought me a beautiful edition of, and I was really excited to read it, but unfortunately, it was a miss for me. I gave this 2.25 stars. I finally bit the bullet and got rid of the book. So we're gonna skip the rest of row 3 and move down to row 4. Biopunk. This was a new genre to me. Read a book that focuses on biotechnology and or its consequences. Biopunk meaning biological technology is kind of is where the bio part, so living things. So hard mode is that there is absolutely no electricity present in the book. There is no electric technology. For this, I read both of the books that are published in this. So this one is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, otherwise known as the Shadows of the Leviathan series. I gave this 5 stars. I gave the next one, A Drop of Corruption, 5 stars. The third one comes out this year, and I just can't wait. I highly recommend these. It's more Sherlock Holmes mystery than it is weird sci-fi fantasy. Elves or dwarfs. So notice it says elves, not fairy or fae. So that's actually what made this difficult. And then dwarves are actually a highly underrepresented characters in books, I feel like. The hard mode is that the main character is an elf or a dwarf. So for this, I read A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by Jay Penner. The female main character of this book was not my cup of tea. The male main character was an elf, so I counted this for hard mode. I gave this book 2 stars. Honestly, one of the reasons I finished it was because I wanted to count this for my square. If you DNF a book, you can't count it. This was one of those books that I purely finished because I wanted it to count for my Our Fantasy square, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Tell me in the comments what you think. Next up from row 4 was Stranger in a Strange Land. Hard mode is that the main character is an immigrant or a refugee. For this square, I read Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. Absolutely loved it. One of my top books of 2025, 5 stars, would recommend. And in that book, the male main character is an immigrant into the community in the book. So that counted for hard mode. Down to our final row, starting with Recycle a Bingo Square. So this prompt actually requires you to pick a square from the past. This is a prompt. This wasn't me swapping out a square. From their 2020 Our Fantasy, there was novel translated from its original language. Hard mode was that a woman had to be the author. For this, I read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. It's one that is talked about often, and how do I put this? I don't regret reading it. It definitely made me think. I could see having lots of moral conversations or ethical conversations, academic style conversations with people while reading this book. I just read it on my own. I didn't know anybody else that was reading it. I did give this 3.25 stars. I feel like it is a book that being read in a book club style setting or an academic style setting, somebody might get more out of. I think it was worth my time. Next up from row 5 was a cozy sci-fi or cozy fantasy. Your definition of cozy is up to you. I think I went with the more traditional definition of cozy. The hard mode was that the author was new to you. I read The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This is by no means her first work. Actually, she's written a ton of middle grade books, but she was new to me. I hadn't heard of her, but I had heard of this book. It was okay for me. It was almost too cozy. I did give this 3 stars. I'm really intrigued by the book that comes after this, The Enchanted Greenhouse. I kept this copy because I bought The Enchanted Greenhouse, and I'm gonna see how I feel about The Enchanted Greenhouse. If I end up having the same feelings about both of them, I will probably get rid of both of them. But if I do end up really enjoying The Enchanted Greenhouse, I'll probably just keep them because why not? I have problems. So that's where I left you all in October or September, whenever it was. And so now we're getting into these squares that I had yet to fulfill at that point. Back up to row 1. This was a square I was struggling with. I could not find something to meet the criteria. A hidden gem, a book with under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. And it can't be a new release. It can't be an ARC. This was difficult for me because I have so many books that I want to read. I don't necessarily rely purely on Goodreads reviews, but I do tend to get recommendations that are popular or around on Booktube or in the mailers or, featured at the library. And so finding a book with under 1,000 ratings, really, really difficult. And I should say that also sounded interesting. I should add that caveat there. So what I ended up finding for this was a book called Ghostly. I ended up listening to it exclusively in audio by Kate Sarazenta, I think is how you say it. This was a cute little paranormal romance where a man moves into a house. He has to leave his highfalutin lawyer lifestyle for scandalous reasons, and he ends up running away to this small village, and he moves into this house, and the reason that the house is unoccupied is because it is haunted by our female main character, who is I think Victorian era ghost. He is the first person that can see her and talk to her, and they end up trying to figure out why she hasn't moved to the beyond. At the time of me recording this, it had 882 ratings, 206 reviews, so I'm under that 1,000, so it still meets the criteria. I did enjoy it. I gave this 3.5 stars. It was a nice little fluffy, light read. It wasn't spicy by any stretch of the imagination, but there was a little bit of a romance component to it. I'm kind of glad it wasn't spicy because it was about a dude and a ghost, and yeah, it was a good audiobook to listen to while I was around the house. The next square, published in the 80s. Hard mode for this would be that it was written by an author of color. I ended up reading Mort by Terry Pratchett. This is part of the Discworld series. If you're unfamiliar with the Discworld series, it's composed of a bajillion, I think it's 42 books that all take place in a world. Okay, let's see if I can remember it. It's a flat world on the backs of a turtle, no, on the back of a turtle who is on an elephant or there's 4 turtles on 1 elephant, or maybe it's 1 turtle on 4 elephants. I can't remember, just floating in space. But it feels like a very medieval world. And then within the Discworld, that's why it's called the Discworld, because it's a flat disc. Within that world, there are a bunch of sub-series. So there's the Guards is a series, the Witches are a sub-series, Mort is from the Death series. It's about a guy who's looking for a job. He's a young guy that has since come up in the world to look for a job, and he ends up getting offered a job by Death, so he has to play the part of Death, and obviously he has some problems with this. This particular one, it was published in 1987, so it met the criteria. However, Terry Pratchett is not an author of color, so it does not meet hard mode. I ended up giving this 3.25 stars. There were parts of it that were really funny. There were parts of it that I enjoyed. It was too satirical for too long, in my opinion. Like, I just kind of got bored at some point. I have some other books that are part of the Discworld series. I'm going to try the first book in The Witches, which is Equal Rights, and then I've heard a lot of good things about Guards. So I haven't completely abandoned the Discworld series, but I've abandoned the depth part of the Discworld series. High fashion is our next square. So read a book where, fashion or accessories, fiber arts, clothing is an important part of the book. And hard mode is that the main character is the one that's making the fashion. I had intended on reading a different book for this square. It was brought to my attention that the Dungeon Crawler Carl series actually falls really well into this book, and I completely agree. I'm putting the first one on here. I just finished book 6 this month, so I've continued on in this series. Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman, if you are unfamiliar, is about a guy and a cat. It's his ex-girlfriend's cat. The cat has escaped the apartment in the middle of the night. Carl gets out of bed, throws a coat on. He's not even wearing any pants. He doesn't even have shoes on. He goes outside to get his girlfriend's cat because the cat has jumped out of the window. When he's outside, an alien race comes and collapses everything in the world, instantly killing anybody that was in any sort of structure, and the only people that are alive are people that were outside at this time. And then a portal, or a door, opens up and you have the option to enter, and if you enter, you are essentially put into a game show, reality show type competition where you're trying to get through, I think it's 12 levels. This is the first book in that series, and it is considered lit RPG, so it is a book that is written like a video game, which I play video games. I actually don't play a lot of RPG video games though, and so I was cautiously apprehensive about this, but obviously I am on book 6. I am loving it. So within this book, even within this first one, Carl opens boxes and receives rewards in the form of clothes. He gets toe rings, he gets jackets. He never gets pants though. He doesn't have pants or shoes. So far, I'm book 6 in and the man still doesn't wear pants. Princess Donut, the cat, also gets other clothes and accessories. Hats are becoming a big thing for her, and these give them various power-ups and rewards. Very important in their survival in the game, and a very integral part of the book. So I was glad that I could include this because I've been really loving this series and always like to hype it up. It doesn't, however, meet hard mode. Carl is not the one that is creating the fabric. Down with the system. Read a book where the main plot revolves around disrupting a system. This is a very common plot in lots of sci-fi and fantasy books. The hard mode is that it is not a governmental system. So for this, I read R.F. Kuang's Babel. I gave this 5 stars. Absolutely love this. Tabbed the crap out of it, suggested it to my mom, who also loved it. This was my first R.F. Kuang. I'm excited to read some more. I don't think this qualifies. Really, it's a book about language and colonialism. It's 1800s England. It is an alternative history, alternative reality. So there are aspects of this book that are historically accurate. There are a lot of really interesting and intriguing footnotes in this book because R.F. Kuang pulled in actual historical events. In this world, there are silver bars that you can imbue with magical words, specifically translated words. So you put the original language and the translated language on the bar, the silver bar, and it causes magic to happen. And in this world, that magic is used to operate trains, to operate cars. It is essentially becoming the technology. I loved all of the words about language, about how words are lost in translation, how many times foreigners say like, oh, there's not a word for this, or, you know, the closest translation I can think of is this. And that's essentially what this book is all about, in addition to it being about colonialism. A young Chinese-born boy is taken from his home. He's raised by this professor translator to go to Babel, to go to the Babel portion of, is it Oxford? Yeah, to go to Babel College in Oxford and work in the like language and translation area. And it's just about him coming to terms with colonialism and the power of all of this, and just trying to take back his identity and sense of self, essentially. And it's a standalone. Like, there are no other, like, this is it, although it's quite the tome. I highly recommend. There is some sort of disrupting of the system, and I felt like even though it is within a school, it is a dark academia, ultimately when you're fighting colonialism, there is some sort of government involved. So I did not count that as hard mode. I'm trying to be true to the letter here. Moving right along to row 2, I had most of row 2 done. This was one, the only reason I hadn't brought it up in my previous video, there are a number of books I could have counted for this. I was trying to see if I would reach hard mode. So my next square is the last in a series. The hard mode for this is that the series is 4 or more books. With sci-fi fantasy, there's a lot of series that are usually involved. I read a lot of series. I read a lot of the Murderbot books, but she's still not done writing those. T. Kingfisher's Sworn Soldier series, I've read all of those. That was only 3 books. I knew there were a lot of books I could read for this. I did read a lot of duologies this year, so I never was able to hit hard mode. So then I just kind of had to pick which book I wanted to recommend for this. So this particular one is Ghostsmith. The first book in the series is called Bonesmith. This is it's a YA duology. I would actually say it leans more towards new adult. It does not read like young YA. It definitely reads as like older YA, which is why I would count it as new adult. Oh, what is the name of the series? I think Bonesmith is the name of the series. I will put the name of the series on the bottom if I'm getting it wrong. So these are by Nikki Pau-Preto. I gave this particular book 4 stars. I think I rated the first book similarly. I really enjoyed the series. In the second book, we started to get POVs from other characters in the book. This is a world where there are different elements and different types of magic that control the different elements. In the first book, our female main character is a bonesmith, so she can actually control bone, and she is protecting people that help guide spirits. In this particular world, when somebody dies, their spirit does not leave. They are trapped on the earth, and they can be dangerous, essentially. Well, she ends up getting banished to another part of the realm, the world, and she gets closer to the area where there are a massive amount of dead people due to some tragedy, and so it's a wall that is protecting them. While she's there, she meets a prince that is a goldsmith, so he controls gold, and she essentially has to protect him. She's trying to impress the people by protecting the prince to get back to her home, but she ends up going on an adventure where she runs into an ironsmith, which is a banished type of magic, and it's just about these 3 young adults, this goldsmith, this bonesmith, and this ironsmith, working together to uncover everything that's going on in their world, everything that they've been lied to. It's one of those books where all of the adults are terrible people. That's what I'll say. All right, I believe I'm moving on to row 3 here. Author of color, read a book by a BIPOC author, essentially. And so hard mode was to read a horror novel by an author of color, and I've been wanting to dip my toe into horror. I only have the dust jacket for this. I let my mom borrow the book. So for this, figure I'll hold the dust jacket. So for this, I read The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. I talked about this a little bit when I was reviewing, when I did our January wrap-up. I think I read this in January. This was my first Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen Graham Jones is a member of the Blackfeet tribe, so he does count as a BIPOC author. He primarily writes horror. I think all of his books are horror. This particular novel, The Buffalo Hunter, takes place in, so it's like early 1900s. Well, it spans a huge amount of time. The setup of the book is that there is a modern day present young woman that is trying to get tenure. Somebody unearths a journal from one of her ancestors, and she's reading that journal. The majority of the book is this journal, this story of a Lutheran pastor in the 1900s who has come in contact with a member of the Blackfeet tribe. This is a time when America was being colonized and settled, and we were in constant battle with the native tribes, and the particular member of the Blackfeet tribe that he is communicating with is essentially a vampire. And so I just want you to think about a Native American vampire roaming the colonial American West. And it was just a beautiful setup for a book. I enjoyed the way it was written, the prose. There are different narrators. When you're reading the Lutheran pastor's journal, it has a different feel for it. When Goodstab, the Native American, is speaking, it is written very much, I mean, the author is a Blackfeet tribe member, and so he wrote as if he, as a Native American would talk. I did a ton of annotating because of all of the different terms that they use. I ended up giving this 4 stars. This was an amazing 5-star. Ranted and raved about this book up until about the last 40 pages. The ending was a bit of a miss for me. I had a lot of inner turmoil. I put a post-it note in my book that said, "Stop reading here." Honestly, the book could have ended there and I would have been fine. The book could have had a couple different endings that I would have been fine with. Instead, it had an ending that kind of went off the rails for me, which is why I ended up giving it 4 stars, which is still a really good book. I did give it to my mom, and I haven't talked to her since she finished it. Curious to see if she read past my post-it note, and I'm curious to see what she thought of the endings. I haven't read any other Stephen Graham Jones, so I don't know if that is kind of his MO, that his endings kind of go off the rails a little bit. I am curious to read more of his works, though. I do know this is one people don't necessarily recommend starting with because it is a lot slower, but I personally really enjoyed it. I did listen to the audio while reading it with my eyeballs, and I think that helped a lot. That one did count for hard mode too, because it's a horror. Okay, continuing in row 3, small press or self-published author. Read a book not published by the big major publishing industries. Hard mode would be that the book had under 1,000 ratings, which I was already struggling with, so I was not trying to get hard mode for this. For this, I read Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. This is the first in a fun little, almost like steampunk kind of murder mystery series, where we have our female main character Isabeau and her female assistant show up at this manor house where they know that a creature is essentially hiding as another person. They took over the person's body, and people start dying. It's almost campy, but not in a negative way. This was a very fun to read book. I read it in October. It was the right vibe for October. There's like a storm going on throughout the whole night. It very much reminded me of the movie Clue, or the play Clue, if you've ever seen that. There was even a scene where Isabeau has figured it out, and they're running from room to room, like all the people are following her, which is very reminiscent of Clue. I really enjoyed this. This is the first in a series of books featuring Isabeau and this steampunky kind of world. So I have since purchased the next one in the series. I'm really excited to read it. I gave this 4 stars. It was perfect. Row 4, my next missing square was LGBTQIA protagonist. There were a lot of books I had planned to read for this. This was actually not the one I was intending on counting, but when I read it, I loved it and it met the criteria, so I wanted to use this as an opportunity to give it a shout out. Hard mode is that the character is also marginalized in another axis, whether that be they're a person of color, they're disabled, etc. A minority of some sort. I read, let's see if this is a hard book to not have glare because it's like a very shiny cover. This is my Owl Crate version. So I read The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. Earlier in 2025, I read Emily Tesh's novella duology that I really liked. So this was my first full-length novel by her. I absolutely loved this. This is a dark academia about an independent school for magic. When I say independent, I mean private school. When I first read the plot of this, I thought it was going to be a college. And then when I started reading it, I found out it was like a K through 12 independent school, which is the type of school that I work for. Our main character is essentially the principal, but she also teaches some of the upper level classes. And when I say upper level, I mean like high school age. And it's just about dealing with teenagers and middle school students that also have to delve into the realm of magic, which I just thought was like the best. I ate it up. I gave this 4.5 stars. It is a standalone. It is self-contained. I could see it having some sequels that come after it if they wanted to. This was perfect. I could see other people not rating it as highly. I think for me, this had a special place in my heart because I am a middle school teacher, former high school teacher at a current independent school. And so there were a lot of things that I could relate to here. And she was a female, so I did count this as hard mode. So she was a female bisexual character. I wouldn't call it dark academia. It definitely had some parts that had me smirking. It definitely had some adventurous parts that had me like on the edge of my seat. This was a really good mix. I highly recommend this. Okay, my battery is dying, so I'm gonna speed this up. 5 short stories. I thought this was gonna be difficult for me until I found a few short story sets in Amazon, and I ended up reading 2 different short story sets. The one that I'm going to use for this square was The Time Traveler's Passport, which was a series of short stories that were all related to time travel. The hard mode was to read the entire anthology or collection. I read all 6 of them. I'm going to give you my brief ranking. They're short, so I'm not going to tell you a whole lot. Go read them yourself. They're free on Kindle, essentially. Top 1 from this series, I recommend reading them in order, actually. I thought the order like that they were posted in was really good. It ended with like one of my favorite ones, but I'm going to tell you my ranking order. So Cronus by P. Jelly Clark. Time travel is used for rich white people to go back in time and relive racist South. My next favorite one was 3 Days, 9 Months, 27 Years by John Scalzi. This was my first John Scalzi. I definitely want to read some more of his. This was about a guy that ran the time machine for time travel tourism. My next favorite was For a Limited Time Only by Peng Shepherd. I've actually read another book by Peng Shepherd. I didn't realize it at the time. This one was about a man who basically had a job where he jumped throughout time to help business conglomerates, corporations, people that were inventing things, but it's about his personal experiences with jumping back and forth in time. 4th in the list was Making Space by R.F. Kuang. I thought this was, like I said, Babel was my first foray into reading R.F. Kuang. This was another kind of exposure to her writing style and her story style. This is about a little boy who just randomly shows up. This woman is out running and she finds this little boy and she kind of quickly realizes he's not from this world, and it's just about, you know, how life proceeds after that. 5th on my list for this was All Manner of Things Shall Be by Olivia Blake. This was my first Olivia Blake. I loved the writing. It was very funny. This is about a weird cast of characters living in a house together that have access to time travel. But when I say weird cast of characters, there's like a vampire, there's a succubus, I think there's a succubus, and it was written very like What We Do in the Shadows, like it had a very humorous style to it. Bottom of the list, I actually did not enjoy this one at all. A Visit to the Husband Archive by Kayleigh Bradley. This is the same woman that wrote The Ministry of Time, and I didn't like that book as well. I didn't really like this short story, but I do recommend reading these in the order, like if you go on, they're posted like 1 through 6. I did enjoy the order that they were in, because I think the Cronus, the P. Jelly Clark one was the last one, and it was a really good one to end on. 5th row, I think I'm on the 5th row. Generic title, so I have to read this one too. So read a book that has one or more of the following words: blood, bone, broken, court, dark, shadow, song, sword, and throne. And then hard mode is that the title contains multiple of those words, more than one, or contains at least one of those words and a number, animal, or color. I read 1, Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. So this does meet hard mode, 1 and dark. I was super excited about this. I have purchased The Night and the Moth. I found this at Half Price Books along with Two Twisted Crowns, which is the second in this duology. Booktube had me like really wanting to read this. I was so excited, and oh my lord, this was such a disappointment. I gave this 2.25 stars. I am not reading the second one. I will immediately be getting rid of both of these. You can even see. So you can tell that I like a book, or how much I like a book, when I start tabbing it and then I stop tabbing it. Like, this was written so YA. Our main character was not my cup of tea. She complained a lot. The magic revolved around a series of like tarot-like cards. This is a world where magic is supposed to be used by these cards, and if you're using magic in other ways, you're not supposed to. It's illegal. The king has deemed it not worthy, and our main character, Elsbeth, is essentially having to hide her magic, but she quickly gets involved with the royal family, not the royal family directly, but some of like the cousins and stuff of the royal family, and she's starting to unearth like some deep secrets. Again, this is one of those books that I only finished because I wanted to see what the hype was and because I wanted to count it for my R Fantasy Squared. I was so upset and so disappointed by this book. So 2.25 stars. Would not recommend. Sorry if you loved it, but it does count for hard mode. So I kept saying asterisks, 25 books asterisks. This year, one of the Our Fantasy Squares was to do something that was not a book. So it could be video game, could be show, could be movie, something that was new to you. There were quite a few things I could count for this. My husband and I watched the movie Mickey 17. So I read the book, Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. I made my husband wait to watch the movie until I had finished the book. So I finished the book and then we watched the movie. I did end up enjoying the movie. It didn't follow the book in some ways. And of course I was doing that annoying thing where I was like, that's not how it happens. But I think I enjoyed the book and the movie about the same. You know, it wasn't like my favorite book. The movie was, you know, interesting and fun to see how they did certain things. I thought they had very different vibes and tones. I think that was one of the things that threw me off. The hard mode for this square is again to like review it on Our Fantasy or to participate in the thread. And as I previously mentioned, that is not my jam. So I didn't do that. So I didn't meet hard mode for this. The last square is actually the last book I read earlier in the month of March. Yeah, we're in March. I read Tress of the Emerald Sea. So our last square is Pirates, read a book where the characters engage in piracy. Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson is about a young girl who lives on an island, a rocky island, in a world that is surrounded by spores. So when it says Emerald Sea, it's not actually water sea, they are spores. She lives in the green spore world, and her love interest, which is the son of the Duke on this island, the Duke takes him away to go find, you know, a wife. They travel to other seas and he gets abandoned. And so Tress decides to leave her very comfortable, boring life to go rescue him. She has to venture out on the sea of spores, and these are, think like cordyceps, think like The Last of Us, where if these spores come into contact with liquid, like body fluids of any kind, they immediately sprout and result in terrible deaths, which ironically is also kind of the plot of the Robert Jackson Bennett mystery. Okay, anyway, whatever. We all have a fear of spores, apparently. And so she goes into the Red Sea that has red spores, and the Black Sea, and basically all the different seas have different spores that cause different issues, and everybody is terrified of them. Tress ends up on a seafaring voyage. She becomes a pirate and is off on this adventure. So this is part of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere like special book, so not part of his like other book series. I really enjoyed the writing of this. This was my first Brandon Sanderson. I gave this 4.5 stars. I will probably be reading some other books in this Cosmere world. I really liked his sense of humor, and how he wrote about words and language was really funny to me. Tress was adorable, and I really enjoyed how this ended. So this could have ended in a very like woe is me, like princess saved by night kind of ending, but it didn't. It had a really good, strong female lead character with a good, strong female lead ending, if that makes any sense. So this was a good toe into Brandon Sanderson without having to commit to some of his like huge chunky series. Oh man. Okay, so I did the last book and then my camera died. Hopefully I did the book justice. We have charged it and we're ready to finish this video the same way that I finished my first Our Fantasy Bingo card. So I was really proud of myself that I did this. This was my first ever like official reading challenge. Now that I've done it, I'm definitely thinking about doing some other ones or more in the future. Next month, April 1st, the 26-27 Our Fantasy Bingo board will post, and I'm really excited. I will definitely be participating again. Because of this reading challenge, I read some new authors that I wouldn't have read from. I discovered some books that I wouldn't have read from. I definitely had a lot of winners. I had some not so good winners, but that's okay. I think in the grand scheme of things, there were really only 2 books that I probably would have DNF'd, but I powered through for this. And one of them is a really popular book that I probably would have read regardless of the Our Fantasy Bingo. And so I think overall it was a successful event. I liked that I did a blackout of the whole board. And then in terms of an actual bingo, like getting 5 in a row, I got 1 hard mode bingo. I like doing it that way. I don't know why. I am definitely not going to stress about doing all hard mode, all blackout. I think that might be a challenge for future Genevieve. If I need to up the ante, maybe next year I'll challenge myself to get 2 hard mode bingos. Like if you liked this video, and subscribe if you want to. Be sure to check back next month when I go over the new 2026-27 Our Fantasy Bingo prompts. Until then, happy reading!